Hi, hello everybody. Welcome back to the podcast. Today we have Peter A. Bell back again. Always welcome, always a pleasure. Last weekend you was at the Scottish Sovereignty Research Group meeting. That was last weekend in Dunfermline, was it?
Yes, yes,
Yes,
the
it was
SSRG
in
Conference
Dunfermline.
Centre. Yeah.
I'm sure, like many other people, I watched it on YouTube. I think I've even watched Robert Bruce a couple of times. Great stuff to watch. Anyway, so to get started, so we can get your interpretation of the whole affair, Peter, I'm just going to read sort of a one quote from him, and just a quick one, just to get us started. So Robert Black, Professor Robert Black, KC, he said, while Scotland lost its sovereignty and was extinguished as a nation state, its judicial, legislative, and executive powers were all stripped away. England remained the same as it ever was, losing none of these. So, in essence, England acquired Scotland. It was a takeover, not a merger, and every corporate lawyer or any lawyer with a conscience would agree to that fact. I mean, that pretty. Let me get started on that, Peter. I mean, that's pretty abrupt and pretty clear, isn't it?
Well, he didn't pull any punches, but you wouldn't really expect him to. He was giving a legal opinion, and he's very qualified to do so. And that was definitely the high point of the whole weekend. There were two things really that came out of it, and that was the Professor Black's legal opinion, which is tectonic. It shifts everything sideways. It's big. It's big. And the other thing was, of course, being announced that Craig Murray is to serve as the Salvo Liberation Scotland ambassador. So I think it's ambassador to the UN or just ambassador at large. I'm not quite sure, but he's been given this title of ambassador. So we must all refer to him now as Mr. Ambassador. Uh,
Just like the old days for him, eh?
but all in all, it was a tremendous weekend. I mean, I have great respect for the SSRG anyway, more perhaps than any other group working in the independence campaign. These are serious people, and they're taken seriously by other serious people. So this is something of note, which is why I was so severely pissed off that the National didn't even have anybody present at the weekend, and of course the SNP had no presence, which was not so surprising, but at least equally annoying. Do these people, do they consider themselves part of the independence campaign, or is it that they consider everybody else not part of it? If we're all
Mm.
part of it, then we all turn out to these things, especially something as so obviously, patently non-party political as the Scottish Sovereignty Research Group. Uh, what's the SNP running scared of? Yeah, what is it they're afraid of? A wee challenge here and there. Well, if they're so sure that they're getting it right, they should welcome the odd challenge here and there, so that they
Mm.
can explain and persuade everybody of exactly how they're getting it right, why they're getting it right, what it is that they're getting right, and how it's all going to work out fine in the end. Because that's what they're wanting to tell us. You'd think they would welcome an opportunity, but no. John Swinney wants to come on TV for 30 seconds, get his wee soundbite, or get
Mhm.
his wee quote in the National or other newspapers, and no challenge. He doesn't want to be asked. I think I can understand why he doesn't want to be asked awkward questions, I mean, when he was asked about what would trigger a referendum, what level of support, the rubbish that he came out with, that was Martin Geisler on BBC last Sunday, asked him, this is where the whole 75% thing comes from. He didn't actually say that, but he waffled so much, and what he did say was so vacuous that it was open to anybody to interpret it pretty much any way they pleased. So, it just totally unprofessional for a
So
politician.
the PR did a good job there then.
It was atrocious. Anyway, that's me said my piece about the SNP and the National not turning up. I tell you, the National's been playing catch up afterwards. I think they're mighty embarrassed to being caught out here.
Yeah, I saw the article a couple of
And
days later.
I'm pretty sure they'll make certain that they're there the next time, which hopefully will be next year. Hopefully this will become an annual thing, because it's 2 years since the last one, but hopefully it'll become an annual thing.
Hi. Well, I mean, I read in one of your blogs, and of course it's very interesting now that it's in the process, as it were. I mean, we roughly know how long these things could potentially take, and I noted your remark about, I don't know how likely it is to come for next year's elections, to give it some impetus. It's a difficult one, isn't it?
We're talking now about the Salvo Liberation Initiative. It's not actually SSRG, but Salvo/Liberation.Scot had a major presence at the conference this year. And they were at the centre of it, which is hardly surprising because this initiative, going to the UN, it's another major move in the independence campaign, in the fight to restore Scotland's independence. I had reservations about it. Those reservations are pretty much gone after that conference, after everything that I heard at that conference, and in particular, Professor Black's legal opinion, and other things as well.
Can I just ask you there, because I am really interested to know, because these things have always been known, for hundreds of years, even back in 2014. So, and remarking about what you said once, I think you said you went from a sort of 50% to 80% believer in it. So what exactly was it that Professor Black said that you hadn't realised before? You hadn't put two and two together. What's the connection there?
It wasn't so much not realising anything. It was a case that I was dubious about the way that Salvo Liberation were framing the case. I didn't realise it had been put together quite so well, or was quite so strong. And then with Professor Black's legal opinion put on top of the research done by Sarah Salyers and others, and the whole, and of course the fact that Justice Burtu is now involved with Sharof Fazizov, that as well, it gives you more reason to think that it will be successful. I now don't see how the UN can actually resist, but there's always politics being played in the background. There's international diplomacy at play here. So some outcomes can appear totally illogical to us looking on from the outside. But it was just the way that their case has come together, and what I heard about it at the weekend, and the way that all pieced together, It's now just this solid body of argument and evidence that looks pretty compelling.
Yes.
It's not that not so much that I learned anything new. It's just that I learned that what there was a lot better than I thought it was. If you see what I
Okay,
mean.
that's really, really interesting. So can I just ask then, how do you think that sort of how does that relate, say, back to 2014 and to where we are now? Because to my memory, in my environment, although like these things were known, they were rarely talked about. The whole idea of the Treaty of Union and stuff. They were there, but they were kind of out in the outskirts and stuff. So do you think that this initiative at the moment is going to solidify that? And give it more impetus, get them more into the discourse of
Well,
political debate in Scotland.
it already has, Eddie. It already has. The 2014, we've come a long way since then, and what has happened in the interim is that there's, I think it was Alf Baird that called it the intellectual wing of the independence movement, of which I'm an honorary member. He referred to the intellect, the people who've been doing research and thinking about things and discussing things. A big chunk of the movement, and the main exception being the political parties and the politicians, they were never part of this intellectual wing. But the intellectual wing of the independence movement has moved on dramatically since 2014. The politicians are still there. They're still in 2012, 2013. They've never left there. It was a comfortable place for them, and they've never left it. In their heads, they've never left it. But we've moved on a long way, and part of that has been, just as the very term independence was normalised by the Yes campaign for the 2014 referendum, so terms such as colony and liberation, these sort of terms, this whole topic of Scotland being a colony, it has now been normalised. And it was normalised, I think, before the SSRG conference, but if it was, it's even more so now. It's a topic of debate, a branch of debate that's not going to go away now. It's only going to become more and more prevalent, which, as I say, that was going to happen anyway. If I can explain that one of my concerns about the Salvo Liberation Initiative going to the UN, seeking to get Scotland on the list of non-self-governing territories, with all that implies, which is not as much as a lot of people think, but I'll come back to that. One of my concerns was, right, what if it fails? When you go into a venture like that, an initiative like that, you have to think of, what if it fails? Does it fail gracefully, or does it leave us squirming in the mud? Does it sweep the carpet right out from under us? And I was afraid that failure would be taken as, I mean, if the UN turned around and said, no, Scotland is not a self-governing territory, that would be taken, in fact, it would be validation of the Union. And so that would take away a big part of our argument, that unionists would then have be able to argue, oh, but the UN, you complain about the union this and the union that, but the UN says the union's perfectly fine. So yeah. That was a concern, but now I have so much more confidence that the initiative will succeed. I see it as being worth the gamble. I mean, the same will still happen if they fail, It will still be bad, but the chances of success now make it worth the gamble.
Mm-hmm. Can I just ask you a question, Pete? Because of course this is all really, really interesting. But what Professor Black and Alf Bed and Sarah all kind of said was, and it's made plain is that Scotland had its own law, and that its people had authority over its representatives. Okay, so this is Scots law in Scots nation. So if I understand that correctly, what that means to me is that we literally are the arbiter of our own future. We can decide what we want to do, regardless of any external externalities, countries, or whatever. So, and I understand that in the modern context, we would have to have international recognition and all this. I'm not that naive, but just from a simple point of view, can you point me in the right direction of how that works? Because either we are sovereign and therefore we can make our own laws regardless of what anyone else says, or are we making it that we're not even going to be able to do that unless we're internationally recognized? Can you just square that up for me a bit, if you wouldn't mind?
The thing about sovereignty is that you either are or you aren't, but it's not just what you are, it's how you behave, it's how you act, it's how you think. And the British give a very good illustration of how people think when they know that they're so they don't just think that they're sovereign, they know that they're sovereign. It's in their DNA, so to speak. The trouble with the British, of course, is that they also think they're sovereign over everybody else. But that sovereignty is the ultimate power. And the people of Scotland are sovereign. We are the ultimate authority. The trouble is, we haven't been exercising that authority. So if you're sovereign and you don't act sovereign, somebody else is going to take that power that is left unused. It doesn't just disappear, it doesn't evaporate. If you don't use it, somebody else comes along, picks it up and uses it. And because we haven't been exercising our own sovereignty, we've allowed the British to do that. We've allowed the British state to do that. England as Britain, whatever you want to call it. And they have been using that power against us. It's basically our own power. They are pretenders to our sovereignty. And really, all that's required to totally turn that around is for us to say, no, we are sovereign. Your authority is void. Your authority is false. It has no validity. It is not legitimate. It does not derive from the people of Scotland. Therefore, it cannot be legitimate in Scotland. It's basically just a case of saying it. That's the way it works with power. I mean, the British state only has the power that it does over us because we allow it. It has that power because it says that power and nobody challenges them. Power isn't given, power is taken, and it remains with the taker until somebody comes along and challenges them for it. And if the challenge succeeds, then that power changes hands. If it fails, it stays where it is, obviously. But it's always taken. There's no such thing as power that is given, because the giving of power, or the apparent giving of power, is actually an affirmation of the superior power of the giver. The giver has the power to give, and if they have the power to give, they have the corollary of that is that they have the power not to give or to withhold.
They give privileges and not rights. Privileges.
That's the situation that we have. We have a Scottish Parliament, which, whatever anybody says, that is the Scottish Parliament. It is directly elected by the people of Scotland using an effective system of proportional representation. Therefore, it is Scotland's national parliament. It has been usurped by the British state. We have to take it back. first of all, we have to take back our government, which means we have to get the politicians doing what they're supposed to do and standing up for the people, being the agents of the people. And then we can take back our parliament. And once we've taken back our parliament, we take back our nation. I know it sounds simple, but it actually is. That it is simply a case of asserting it and expect a challenge and be prepared to meet and beat that challenge.
Okay. So
sorry, that's what the manifesto. That's what Scottish UDI is. It's it's a form of UDI tailored to Scotland's circumstances. It's the clever way of doing UDI. And it's clever because it preempts the challenges. We expect challenges from the British state, and this Scottish UDI Manifesto for Independence preempts those challenges and at least makes it more difficult for the British state to mount a legal challenge, and very difficult for them to win that challenge. So yeah, it was inevitable that we got into talking about the Manifesto for Independence along with all this, because it's essential. It's essential. I've seen a lot of people, and this was another danger I saw with the Salvo Liberation Scot initiative going to the UN. Another danger that I saw, and it has been manifest for weeks now, if not months, and that is people describing the initiative, the Salvo Liberation Scot initiative, as a route to independence. I say, no, I think we should go down the Salvo route, because you should go down the UN route. That's how we'll get independence. There's something on the internet the other day about the UN decolonising Scotland. Wrong, totally wrong. The UN will not decolonise Scotland. The only thing that will decolonise Scotland is the people of Scotland. The UN is there in an oversight role, oversight and support. The actual effort to restore our independence, to decolonise, that has to come from us.
Yeah,
that has to be an internal political and parliamentary process. And to meet the UN's standards, it has to be a referendum set up by the Parliament. So the whole thing ties together. The Scottish UDI would work without the UN. It would. But with the UN there supporting the effort to decolonise, it just makes it all the more powerful.
It gives it far more legitimacy. That's kind of what I was asking. That's exactly
the two things they're essential. But it's the local, internal to Scotland process, political and parliamentary process. That is the main thing. If that isn't there, there's nothing for the UN to support. You know, what are they going to support? I mean, supposing the UN had said or was to say tomorrow, yes, that's Scotland on the list of non-self-governing territories, what difference would it make? It would make no difference at all, because we have
no one's acting on it. Yeah.
We don't have political parties or a parliament or a government that is ready to act on that. So
this brings it.
Nothing at all would happen.
Well, this brings it to what I would say is the crux of it, because if we take if we accept everything that was said at the weekend, we know about mergers and how we are, and the Treaty of Union's inoperable and stuff, and Scotland is sovereign, and the people are sovereign over its representatives and the monarchy. Okay, so but the context we are in now is that we have elected representatives who, which you stated at the beginning of this podcast, that they didn't even show up for this event, which leads me to believe that. I mean, for instance, like you said, if the United Nations agree with Salvo, okay, and it's literally a go ahead, and we need to get this process going. If we had the Scottish government behind us, there's pretty much that's what you need, isn't it? But we don't have that, do we? So what I'm trying to ask you, Peter, what's your analysis of how we get to that point? Because as we stand at the moment, our elected representatives don't seem to be having any interest in this at all, which is I can't understand.
Well, the common response to that is, get rid of the SNP. And let's face it, it's mainly the SNP. It has to be, because the SNP is the dominant political force. So that's a get rid of the SNP, and even get rid of the Parliament. Well, that simply isn't going to happen. The best information that we have to go on is the polling. If anybody has better information, let me know. But the polling is telling us that the SNP is still going to be at the very least the biggest single party in the Scottish Parliament after the 2026 election. And they're therefore probably the party of government. That is going to happen. We have to assume it's going to happen. But there are people, and people who otherwise I might take seriously, people who are assuming that the SNP will be somehow out of power, or that they will be under the influence of some other party or parties, which will force them to behave differently. And neither of these things is going to happen. Neither of these things is a safe assumption at all in any way. The only safe assumption there is that the SNP will be, again, the dominant party, probably the party of government. And if it isn't the party of government, either as a majority or more likely a minority government, then it will be the party of government in a coalition, and it will be by far the largest party in that coalition. It will dominate that coalition. So the idea that you can just discount the SNP is total nonsense. So we're stuck with it. That's what it amounts to. We're stuck with the SNP. We're stuck with a vehicle which isn't moving.
Yeah.
So what do you do if there's somewhere that you've got to get to, and you've got to get to it in a hurry, and you've got a vehicle, but it isn't moving? Well, you move it. You make it move. You force it to move. You push it to get it started, or whatever you do, whatever it takes to get it moving. And that's what we're going to have to do. It's no good switching your vote from one.
How are we going to do that, Peter? How are we going to get? How are we going to get? I mean, go through the process here. How do we even get our our elected representatives to take to the Scottish Parliament? And how do we? I mean,
it's a national issue. And it has to be fought. It's a campaign that must be fought on a national basis. And the only way that we can change the SNP, because that's basically what it comes down to, if we can get the SNP back to being a genuine party of independence, the other nominally pro-independence parties will be obliged to follow. So we have to focus on the SNP. And the only thing that can force a change on them is some kind of mass action, mass popular action. That's why I set up the Manifesto for Independence petition. It's a petition urging Originally it said demanding, but a lot of people didn't like that. So I didn't like compromising, but we are the people. We can demand if we bloody well want to. But
That's right.
urging the political parties to adopt a manifesto for independence. That gives us, the voters, a firm commitment. That gives us the assurance that if there is a pro-independence majority in the parliament, this, and this will happen. These things will follow. It also allows us to treat the 2026 election as a plebiscite, a referendum. How it does that, you get people saying, oh, we should make it a referendum on independence, and they never tell you how they're going to make it a referendum, because a referendum has to be binary. It's a choice between two things. It's either yes or no. It's take it or leave it. And there's nothing binary about an election. So if we're going to make it a referendum, a de facto referendum, then we have to introduce a binary element. The way we introduce a binary element is by all the pro-independence parties having exactly the same manifesto for independence incorporated into their election manifestos. That way, a vote is either for that manifesto for independence or not for it. That is binary. And that way, all the votes of all the pro-independence parties are counted as a vote for that manifesto for independence.
And does that, and
there can be no dispute about that.
Yeah, and would that give sort of, well, at least internally give competency to the fact that they can go ahead and then act on independence? I mean, even if Westminster said you can't introduce, like you said, a binary note into it, but internally we can say, well, we've just literally had the go ahead, from our people to carry on with the process.
Westminster has no role in this. You can stop talking about Westminster, stop thinking about Westminster. Westminster has no role in the exercise by the people of Scotland of our right of self-determination. It's not me saying that, it's the UN. And that's one of the reasons that it would be good to get the UN on board, because it would then state, it would be stated that the UK government has no role, the British state has no role. It's entirely an internal matter, and we have to start thinking about it that way.
So I suppose what I'm saying is that although some of us would say that we already know this or accept these facts, what we want actually done is for this to be to reach a broader audience, so then people can then agree with it.
Well, hopefully this sort of program and maybe other things that I do and other things that other people do, I feel kind of like a one-man operation here, but I know I'm not, but it does feel a bit that way at times. But the way this works, the way the Manifesto for Independence, the way Scottish UDI works, and we should always refer to Scottish UDI, not just UDI, Scottish UDI, tailored to Scotland's unique constitutional circumstances. And what that does is that by making the 2026 election a referendum on the question of the Scottish Parliament asserting its legislative competence in the area of the Constitution, we use that as a de facto referendum, use the election as a de facto referendum, so that the Parliament then has a hopefully massive mandate to do that, to simply assert its legislative competence, to take that competence, to repossess that competence, because that competence rightly lies with the National Parliament of Scotland anyway. that's a defining factor of a nation, is the powers over parliamentary powers over the constitution. So that is the rule that we have to break, and that there is no route to independence that doesn't involve breaking at least one of the rules that's there to preserve and protect the union. We're going to have to break the rules at some point. The thing is to be clever about the rule that you break and the way in which you break it. That's Scottish UDI. It's the clever way of doing UDI. So we then have the mandate for the Scottish Parliament to assert its legislative competence, which it does. And immediately it does that, before even, we then proceed. We proceed on that basis. We don't wait for anything from anybody. We don't wait for a nod from Westminster, certainly, or the UN, or anybody else. We are the sovereign people. This is our parliament. Our parliament now has powers over the constitution. We use those powers like any sovereign people would. The government introduces a bill which is effectively a proposal to dissolve the union. Quite a detailed proposal with, for example, and possibly the most important thing that would be included would be a provisional constitution, a sort of bare bones constitution that would simply allow us to be recognised as a nation. So that bill passes, it becomes an act subject to a confirmatory referendum of the Scottish people. This is where the referendum comes in. Not a referendum on independence, but a referendum on an actual proposal, so that everybody knows exactly what they're voting for or against. And if that proposal is accepted in that referendum, then that is it. It's over. There's no negotiating independence.
Exactly.
That's it. It's over. The only thing to be negotiated
the divorce details,
the post-independence settlement. And the big bits of that, the big things can be done immediately. There's lots of stuff that could take years to settle. This is when the lawyers and the civil servants come into it. We declare independence, and then it's up to the lawyers and the civil servants to tidy up all the loose ends. But that's what lawyers and civil servants do. That's what the lawyers and civil servants have done in every case of decolonisation. So it is nothing new, and it's nothing extraordinary. I recall that there was a small piece in a newspaper somewhere about, and I think it was the late 90s, maybe 1998, thereabouts. Remember, I'm working from memory here, but there was a story in the paper about the final piece, the final negotiations being completed with Ireland. This is something like 80 years after Ireland became independent. The final piece of negotiation, the final detail was finished. I'll bet nobody in Ireland or anywhere else even knew that these negotiations were going on. It certainly hasn't affected the way Ireland conducts itself as an independent nation on the international stage. So, the fact that there's still things to be negotiated really is of no consequence. So then we come to the matter, I know you're going to bring it up again, the matter of international recognition. Well, one of the things that I pointed out in one of my interventions, and I have to say, one of the things to be said in favour of the SSRG conference is that people like myself were allowed to speak. We were given the free. I arguably got more than my fair share of time with a microphone. So in one of my interventions, because Professor Black, I disputed a legal point with Professor Black. I was well up the back of the hall. I was out of range. He was stressing that a nation is not independent, is not truly independent until it is recognized as such by other nations. Well, that is true as far as it goes. But the point I made was that independence cannot possibly, international recognition cannot possibly be a precondition of independence.
Well, yeah, this is the point I was trying to get to speak to you about earlier, Peter. That's exactly what I'm saying.
As Sharof Azizov pointed out, it's a bit of a chicken and an egg thing. But you certainly can't wait around, put the process of decolonization on hold, waiting for nations to say that they're going to recognize you. It doesn't require 100% recognition anyway. You know, if the Scandinavian nations recognized us, and a few nations of the EU almost certainly would recognize. You know, the holdouts might be
whoever, but we would trade, and that would be that.
But even at that, it really doesn't matter. It's not something that makes a lot of difference. It makes you officially an independent nation. It makes you able to act as such within the international community. But it doesn't actually stop you being an independent nation if you're not recognized by every single nation. There are plenty of nations that are not recognized, and even nations which don't recognize each other. And there's still trade going on across the border.
Exactly. Yeah.
It may not be official. It may not even be legal.
So what was Professor Black's response then to that when you said that?
Well, he agreed. Thankfully, he agreed that logic forbids it being a precondition. And I think it was at that point that Sharof Azizov made an intervention and talked about it being this chicken and egg thing, which it is almost, except if the process to restore independence is the chicken, it has to go on, even if they
lay an egg.
The other point, of course, Eddie, is that there is absolutely no rational reason to suppose that Scotland will have any great difficulty in gaining international recognition. It's held up as this big scare story, but there is absolutely no reason, so long as the process by which we restore our independence or end decolonization, so long as that is impeccably democratic, and there is no reason. The only grounds any nation could have, the likes of the UK, would be petty spite.
Yeah.
And even the UK doesn't really work that way either. The UK, especially when it's an essential trading partner such as Scotland, the UK
would end up just being all bluster.
I know it's sort of given the lie by the whole Brexit thing, but the UK, they fancy themselves the great negotiators. They think, what we can't win at the point of a gun, we can take in the negotiations, and very often they succeed. And you look at the number of crown dependencies there are. Look at the number of look at the Commonwealth. And there's a Commonwealth of the realm, and then there's this other form of the Commonwealth. But there's all these things where the Brits have kept their hooks in. It might just be one hook, it might just be one claw, but they've kept the hooks in there so that they still have some influence. They still have some sort of power there. They don't let go. And that'll be a dangerous point when they say, okay, that's it. We accept that you're leaving the union, you're ending the union. Let's negotiate. And that is when we should be the most on our guard. When they decide they want to negotiate, that's when they get dangerous. And if I have any worries at all, it's that we have people, but this is because I'm looking at the likes of John Swinney and the rest. I worry at times that our negotiating team might not be up to the job of defending us. But there again, I look at the British negotiators now as per Brexit, and I think, nah, even John Swinney could win against that lot.
Yeah, it's not an ideal situation, though, is it? I suppose.
I think we will grow into it. We have developed this knack of emergent leadership. We developed this during the Yes campaign, where when something needed to be done, and it took leadership to do it, when something required a hierarchical organization in order to get it done, like organizing massive marches, for example. You can't do that in an informal way. That there has to be an organization, and it has to be hierarchical. Somebody has to make the decisions, somebody has to pass down the instructions, and somebody has to carry out those instructions. So we had this sort of talent for emergent leadership, that when there was a need for something like that, leadership just emerged out of the Yes movement. The leadership emerged, and then it either kept going or it just faded away when there was no longer any need for it. We've kind of lost that over the past 10, 11 years. But I'm kind of hopeful that we can return to that the leadership, this emergent leadership will come again. One of the reasons that it's kind of gone into abeyance is the temperament of the independence movement. When people who come up with new ideas, novel ideas, new perspectives, the biggest obstacle you find when you're expressing a different view, or that you're trying to put forward a new idea, the biggest obstacle you find is not the unionists. They don't take any interest in that. For them, they're just against independence. That's it. No, the biggest obstacle, the biggest opposition you get is from within the Yes movement. The party loyalists and others, and the people who are just dismissive of everything, unless it's coming from, it's a strange thing that you have people saying, "Oh, politicians, don't trust them. We don't need them. You can do without them," but then. They don't trust anything unless it's been said by a politician. They don't take it seriously unless it's been said by a politician. So,
he's smartly dressed and speaks well.
and gets his name in the paper, or her name in the paper. He gets her face on TV. There's this thing. It's the authority that the status gives you. The status of being a politician, especially an elected politician.
It's very true, and that to this day is that is deliberately recycled through the culture. To try to keep that as traditional. Yeah,
it absolutely is, and this is one of the things that I'm trying to change with the Manifesto for Independence petition. What I'm saying to people is that, yeah, you're sitting there moaning about the way the parties are. You're moaning that they're not doing anything about independence, and worse, they're not even proposing to do anything about restoring independence. You moan about it, you moan about it, but you never do anything to change it. You simply accept that things are the way the politicians tell you they are, and they cannot be different. But what I'm saying is that the politicians only get away with that because we, the people, have lost the knowledge, mislaid the knowledge of how to combine. And as Alexis de Tocqueville said, that is the fundamental knowledge that is required for democracy to function. The people must have this knowledge of how to combine, and we have lost that. We have been, as a people, the people, we become fragmented and alienated and adversarial amongst ourselves, so that there's all these forces working against combination.
Yeah,
we need to overcome them.
It's quite ironic in this age where it's so easy to be able to combine everybody, and yet we're further away than we've ever been, like you said.
You would think so, but the ease and speed of communication actually it empowers the things that push people apart at least as much as it empowers the things that pull people together. So it's a bit of a double-edged sword. It could be used much better, but the whole point is that if people are going to combine, if they're going to come together, they need a venue, they need a point at which to come together. They need something that they can coalesce around. And that is why, again, I started the Manifesto for Independence petition. Partly because we need that. I've put the target at 100,000 signatures, simply to emphasize how important it is, and the sort of combination, the scale of combination that we should be looking for. Because if we achieve that once, we will change politics in Scotland forever. If we can just do that once, the politicians will be running scared. It's there as something for the people to coalesce around, because the Manifesto for Independence, there's no appurtenances to it. It's not laden with policy agendas or anything else. It is simply a manifesto for independence. It is simply a route to independence, a plan for restoring independence, and it is the only plan that there is. None of the political parties have a plan. None of them. If they had a plan, they'd tell us. Nobody asks them what their plan is. Well, nobody apart from me and a handful of other people.
There is no plan, like you said,
talk about independence. They talk about independence at a time such as this, when there's an election in the offing. They talk about it. And they make statements such like, we are the party that will restore Scotland's independence. Ask them how, and they've got absolutely nothing to say on the matter, not a thing. Or they give some waffle, blah, 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 blah. Well, we will increase support and blah, blah, blah. I said, no. What is the actual process? What will you actually do? What will be the first thing? Assume, Mr. Swinney, assume that you are returned as First Minister again after the 2026 election. What will be the first thing that you do, your first act on the constitutional issue, your first act towards restoring Scotland's independence? What will your first act be? Something you actually do. And everybody should be asking that question. Nobody
Well,
is.
he would say he's not going to do anything until he gets this huge amount of support, which anybody with half a brain knows is just ridiculous.
Well, he's not going to get that support
No.
because he isn't really asking for it. He's asking for support
Mm,
for his party. He's not asking for support for independence. It's all about the parties, and people have to
mm,
get away from this idea that it's who you vote for, or as in which party you vote for. It isn't. It's what you vote for. If the parties don't have some sort of proposal that you can vote for, then you're simply voting for the party because it's the party.
party. Yeah, exactly.
You're not actually voting for anything. And it has to be a real commitment. We don't want another British Labour Party that promised everything during the
Mm-hmm.
election, the 2024 election campaign. And they've gone back on, not just reneged on every promise, they've done the exact opposite in many cases of what they said they do. It's been the most brazenly dishonest election that there's ever been, I think. You know, I mean, they had more honest elections back in the 18th century, for Christ's sake,
Yeah, yeah,
when
yeah.
they were openly bribing voters. Yeah,
Hmm. Well,
no,
you need ID, like photographic ID and everything these days. I mean, these just are more adding more control over the voting as well. The way I see it, I don't see it as that a conspiracy theory.
well,
Lots of poorer people and stuff, and people who hardly have any interest in politics. If suddenly they need to go down there with their photographic ID and all, they're not going to even be asked, and
well,
and they know that.
yes, I'm all in favour
Mm,
of making the voting system more secure.
mm.
But the first rule of independence, first rule of democracy is everybody gets a vote. Everybody.
Yes.
And that I do mean everybody. That is the starting point. Everybody's got a vote, man, woman, and child. And you start from that point, and then you start to make the arguments about who should have the vote withheld. And some of those
Yes.
arguments are
Yeah. Yeah.
easy, like we withhold the vote from
Hmm.
infants for very
Yeah.
obvious reasons. That's an easy argument to make when they're
Hmm.
2, 3, 4, 5 years old. It gets more difficult when they're 13, 14, 15. And then it really gets to be impossible to make an argument to withhold the
Hmm.
vote from 16-year-olds. I wouldn't want to make that argument anyway. But we start from that position that absolutely everybody gets a vote. But then you've got to make it easy for them to vote. You'd be making it easier, not more difficult. The whole security thing has been used as a disguise. It's
Yes.
a mask because it is all about keeping certain voters away from the polls.
Hmm.
It's, it's not it's not about the security thing because voter fraud,
It's tiny. Mm.
impersonation, as it's called, is
Yeah. Yeah.
virtually unknown. Yeah,
Yes. Exactly. Exactly.
there's maybe one or two instances at every election, and when you count
Mm-hmm.
it, like in a UK election, there's what 40 million people voting. You've got two people trying to make out there's somebody else. Two out of
Mm-hmm.
40 million. Yeah, needing ID cards. No, not
It's
normally. If if there were not people in the position that they would be deterred from voting by the need to have photographic ID,
mm,
then I would be all in favour of it. But there are people in that position. The point is, they shouldn't be in that position. They shouldn't
yeah.
be homeless or
Mm.
or, or poor or in debt
Or
or
restricted or
a bank
excluded.
account or
Yeah.
whatever it is. They should not be in that position. And
Hmm.
then there would be no problem with voter ID.
It's
Get the people out of the position where they're unable or unwilling to get photographic ID.
yeah. Yeah. I'll can I ask you? It's more like a philosophical thing, I suppose you could call it. But I mean,
Oh,
for
there you
instance,
go ahead, Eddie.
what we're always talking about here is like we can look at the macro, we can look at the Manifesto for Independence, or Salvo, and we can look at the personal activists like myself. I said to a friend once, I think you should write a book called The Loneliness of the Long Distance Activist.
Mhm.
And and the way I see this is, it's like, for instance, if you go out into the world, not that many people really, even in Scotland at the moment, there's not great discourse about independence as such, generally speaking. But there's a great deal of other discussion about other things going on in the world. And for instance, even if we're talking about the taking back of the rights to protest, or having to have certain IDs and stuff, and all these things that get on people's nerves. And for me personally, even before I got involved with the Scottish independence thing, this was always my route. And I suppose it's like it's the same kind of thing as having a manifesto for independence, if you can reduce it down to the person. And this is kind of how I want to live my life. It's like I don't want to be able to be restricted from that or be excluded from that because I haven't conformed to this or that. And so when I look at the Scottish nation, and I think to myself, if you ask somebody just personally, would you prefer to have, be in a country where you are sovereign and, have control over your elected representatives? Or do you want to live in a country where you're literally just dictated to and you can have your privileges taken away from you at any time? I mean, to me, it is completely a no-brainer. And to me, obviously, I think what I am trying to do my best, and you are too, I suspect, if I'm trying to draw an analogy here, is that we literally are trying our best to get people to literally to take a choice. What's your binary choice here? Which environment would you prefer to live in, and what are you struggling for? What is your take on your individual attitude as an activist, and how you take it into the bigger perspective of trying to pursue Scottish independence?
Well, the fact that I remain focused on the constitutional issue doesn't mean that I don't have views about. For example, I have a vision. I keep going on about how we get too much of this vision thing, visions of what it'll be like after independence. Enough already. We've had, what, 12 years of visions. It's no longer having any effect on the voting public. What we need to hear about now is the how, the practical machinery for getting there. I've described it as selling independence like a holiday destination, uh, but there's no means of travelling there. The people who are selling us, they can't book a flight, they can't book that, they can't do anything, or they won't. But yeah, I do have my vision. I insist on this focus on the constitutional issue because the constitution sits above all other politics, the politics of public policy. Constitution is about power. It's about answering Tony Benn's 5 questions on power. How did you acquire it? What do you use it for? How can it be forfeited? Who benefits from it? I've missed one, but Tony Benn's 5
I
questions.
remember you say that now. Yeah, I remember that. Yeah,
Anybody
go on.
can look them up. The Constitution is what answers those questions. So it sits above everything else. But the fact that I'm focused on that doesn't mean that I don't have ideas about what I would like to see in independent Scotland. It's just that I choose not to talk about these things very much because I want to keep that focus on the constitutional issue. And because it's quite pointless me talking about what I would like to see in independent Scotland, unless I have that some sort of plan for getting there. And that's what's missing from the political parties and a big chunk of the Yes movement. They all have these great ideas about how they want things to be, what being independent is going to be like. but they haven't a clue when it comes to becoming independent. So I'm focused on the becoming. But I
do understand what you mean, and
I'm
I'm
on
not.
board with peace and an end of disease and poverty.
I'm
Just
not.
same
I'm
as
not
any
asking
beauty
for.
queen.
I'm not sort of trying to point out sort of any kind of a vision. What I'm trying to point out is to me, you make your vision from it. So what I would argue is that if you had two choices and you have literally two ways to have your society controlled, whether it be the Scots way or whether it be the English way, which way would you choose? That's your binary choice.
Yeah.
Now that leaves the vision or no vision. It takes it out of the context. What I am saying is to me, if you break it down into that binary choice, surely you would choose the Scots one because that gives you much more freedom to create visions rather than be told what you're dreaming.
The trouble then, Eddie, becomes getting people to perceive it as that such a choice.
It should. Why would that be difficult, Peter? I mean, is it just me? It sounds pretty simple to me. Like I said, it's a philosophical thing, but it seems pretty straightforward.
To be honest, I think it's perfectly simple as well. But I find it difficult to imagine. Like it's like trying to imagine being unable to read. If you're literate, you simply cannot imagine what it's like to be unable to read. It's just like if you can see, you cannot imagine what it's like to be blind. You can close your eyes, but then you always know you can open them again. So you don't know what it's like to be blind. And I don't know what it's like to be apathetic or alienated or disconnected from the democratic process, because I have never been that person, and I just find it very difficult to understand that mentality. So what I always say is that the electorate is a dumb beast. It doesn't matter how smart.
The SSRG and stuff. Well, I would sort of counter argue, wouldn't they? Counter argue and that say, well, this is the colonized mind we're talking about here, Peter. I mean,
Absolutely.
yeah. Because
yes.
what I'm trying to, I think what I'm trying to get at is it is the colonized mind that's affecting us. I mean, you said earlier about sovereignty, and your words were, I think, to be sovereign, you have to act sovereign.
Yes.
Which is kind of the key, and we're not acting sovereign, and we're not even doing it individually, although we don't even probably pay attention to that fact. But I'm
Yeah.
just saying, underlying that, I do think each and every one of us, even people who don't get involved with politics, like I said, they're just commenting on the world around them. If only they would stop and consider that it's all politics, even to a little degree, then we might see this mass change that you're on about. Because I think I agree with you, we need a mass change. And even with what's going on at the moment, hopefully this will be a mass change in the culture of Scotland. But it's a big ask, isn't it, under the current context?
The problem we have is getting people to start the process of decolonizing their mind.
Yes.
A lot of people started that process. They made some steps in that process, and everybody in Scotland, everybody who's been brought up in Scotland, their mind is colonised. This isn't, some people take it as an insult when you say this, but it's simply a fact of life in Scotland.
Yeah.
If you live in a place that's been a colony for 300 odd years, and you've been brought up in it, and you've been immersed in that colonial culture, your mind is colonised. If your mind wasn't effectively colonized, then the colonizer would need troops on the ground to keep order. So all our minds are colonized, and I include myself in this.
Yeah, me too.
You don't get rid of that in one generation. It will take successive generations till we're rid of it. But we can start to effect change if we can get people to start questioning those aspects of their colonized minds. And thinking in terms of being empowered again, thinking in terms of being sovereign, it's how you get people to first what was it I said during the Yes campaign? I said that everybody who moved from no to yes, they started that journey. We used to talk about the journey, yeah, from no to yes.
Yeah.
Everybody who made that journey, completed that journey, started by questioning the union. They
Hmm.
started by questioning the way things are. And
Yeah.
uh,
Okay.
that's what we have to induce in people, a way of questioning or re-examining the way things are, taking a new perspective on it. Because unionists are unionists because they have a certain perspective of the union as being this great, beneficial, wonderful thing. And yeah, it's a totally false perspective. But they're unionists or British nationalists because we can't persuade them to question that.
Hmm.
If they're British nationalists, I used to say a unionist is someone who has not yet questioned the union. A British nationalist is someone who insists that the union should never be questioned. Uh, if we can induce people to start say, does it have to be like this? Is there a better way? But it's getting people to that point is very difficult. We keep being told that, you know, this is going to be the straw that breaks the camel's back. You know,
Hmm.
Brexit was supposed to be Boris Johnson as Prime Minister. Now it's Nigel Farage as Prime Minister, and
Yeah.
now it's what they've done to Grangemouth and the heating allowance, and what they've just done to fisheries.
And
Everything's
Flamingo Land and
supposed
all
to
of it.
be
Yeah.
everything's supposed to be the final straw. So this is supposed to be the last straw, and it never is. It
Hmm.
just never is. It's gone to the stage where it's hard to imagine what the British state would have to do to Scotland for
Yeah.
people to start questioning the system.
I
Uh,
totally agree. I totally agree
it's
with that. Do
uh,
you know what? There's a relation. It reminds me of scandals. I mean, back, I don't know, Perfumer Affair or 70s, and a scandal would be the end of your career as a politician or whatever. Nowadays, there's just, there might be news for 5 minutes and then they're gone and nothing's ever done.
it used to
Mm,
be that if you manage to have your political career, if you manage to be rehabilitated at all, it
mhm.
took years. You
Yeah.
know, you had to go to the back benches and work behind the scenes, and keep
Now
it
that's all
straight.
just,
Yeah,
yeah,
maybe for a decade, and then you get some party office or some junior minister, whatever. Uh,
yeah,
it took that long
years.
to rehabilitate someone. Now it's almost instantaneous.
Genius.
You
Yeah,
know,
that's right.
the PR people, the media relations people seem to go to work instantly. As soon as somebody is caught barbecuing babies or whatever, you know, that's what it would take to shock people. Somebody,
Yeah,
uh,
yeah,
and as soon as the media relations people are in there, I don't know, I don't know how you sort of cover that up. Barbecuing babies, that was a bit extreme. That would be a challenge for the media relations people. But there are other things which are almost as bad.
yeah,
Taking bribes, cheating expenses, or whatever. You can be rehabilitated in a matter of months or even weeks. It's if we look back over the past 5, 10 years, the number of politicians who've been disgraced, and if they so choose, a lot of them choose not to, but if they so choose, they can end up right back there in front again.
mhm.
It's really weird. The
Yeah. It's
rehabilitation.
it's it's just it's just really strange to see what just suddenly becomes normalized, what's acceptable, and you know, whether it's that or whether it's you know, the muddied water of all the politics is
Well,
out
you
there. It's
see,
really,
in
really
the
difficult.
old days, Eddie, we knew how to do a scandal. Oh, we really knew how to do a it would be front page of the Daily Express for weeks. Oh, you mentioned the Profumo affair. How long did they drag that out? And then there was,
Well, yeah, exactly,
and
exactly.
they really knew how to do it. But in these days of rolling news and
Mm,
uh, Twitter, X, for goodness sake,
mm,
there's some poll showing that there's some incredible, like 60 odd percent of people regard Twitter as their main source of news. I think
yeah,
it was Elon
yeah.
Musk that was boasting about it. That's an incredible number. He was probably just talking about America. Uh,
But it's true, though. It sounds probably about right.
this is what we're up against. You know, the TikTok attention span. You know,
Mm.
the 30-second video. Who the hell? Who the hell reads an entire newspaper article these days? Yeah.
Very true,
Look at
very
the
true.
National. Look at the National, for example. It's the same for any other newspaper. Look at the National. Uh, Read the comments below the line. I'll guarantee a third, maybe a half of them, very quickly becomes obvious that they haven't read the article. They're
Hmm.
commenting on the headline or what other people have said about the article.
Yeah.
Don't read the article. They
Mm.
don't read. I've had the same experience with Scottish UDI and Manifesto for Independence. People commenting on it, usually negatively, and it becomes instantly obvious that they haven't even looked at it. And yet they're there pontificating about it.
Hmm. Just shouting slogans.
There's people, like, for example, who say it's not democratic because it doesn't allow for a vote. I said, hang on a minute, there are 2 votes in there, arguably 3, because you've got the de facto referendum on the Parliament's powers, you've got the actual confirmatory referendum, and you've got the election of the government that has the Manifesto for Independence and its election manifesto. So that's like 3 votes. What can possibly be undemocratic about that? And the
Mm.
third one of these votes, at least the third one, the confirmatory referendum, will, in all probability, be overseen and supported by the UN, which brings
Hmm.
us back to where we started.
Yeah.
Did,
Yes,
did
it
you
does.
see how I did that?
That was
Yeah.
very clever, Peter. Well done. You're getting the hang of this.
Oh, yeah, yeah. All I've got to do now is learn how to shut up for a wee while.
I think that's probably why I do this, because then I give myself a chance to shut up, Peter, probably.
Well, yeah. Disaster again. I've had, I think, 3 shots now trying to create video of me explaining about Scottish UDI and the Manifesto for Independence.
All right.
And as I think you mentioned earlier on, I was privileged to be invited to give a presentation on the Manifesto for Independence at the SSRG Conference. It was a lunchtime event, and the arrangements were a bit. It was about 45 minutes late starting, and it got to be very informal because people were going for their lunch and popping in for a wee while, and there were, I think, about maybe a couple of dozen people were there, either for all or part of the thing. Uh,
Hmm.
Anyway, story is, I had video camera there. I got it all set up and ready to record this. And just yesterday, I went to edit the video and discovered that the video itself is wonderful. It's beautifully framed. I look great. There's no sound.
No
There's
sound.
no
Oh
sound.
God. I
I
feel
was
for you there, Peter.
I was using an external camera, an external microphone, and I think there must be something wrong with it, or I forgot to switch it on, or something. So yeah,
Right, Peter. I better stop now. Or like you said, we could go on all day. But yeah, that. Is there anything else you want to add, Peter, before we wind up this time?
only there's one thing,
Go
and
ahead.
that is please, everybody, Manifesto for Independence .scot. I know the petition was originally on the New Scotland Party site. That was always supposed to be temporary. It just saved me creating two websites at the same time. It got to be less temporary than I intended. So total fresh start, starting from zero again. On its own site, Manifesto
Okay.
for Independence.scot.
Oh, I'll have to check that myself.
Go
Yeah.
there, sign the petition and share it. And then once you've shared it, get up tomorrow morning and share it again. And do that every day. Every time somebody shares it, you get another 2 or 3 signatories. And I know it's at less than 300 at the moment, but then it only started on Saturday. People only started to find out about it on Sunday. So it's already gathering signatures at something like 3 times the rate of the previous one, the old one, which is no longer extant. So I would also like to say to people, if you signed the old petition, please come back and sign the new one. Your signature will not be counted twice. The old one is defunct. I was hoping I could find a way to just transfer the signatures, but when you think about it, obviously there cannot be. There's a way to export the signatory data. For obvious reasons, there's no way to import. So that was an easy choice for me, actually, because I was just as happy to start from scratch again. And that's what we've done. So please sign it, sign it. Imagine if there was 100,000 signatures on there. Imagine if we could go to the politicians and say, right, here's 100,000 people that probably aren't going to vote for you because you haven't adopted the Manifesto for Independence. 100,000?
That would be the $64,000 question for the
It's
party.
the only thing. It's the only thing that's going to work. It's the only thing that the politicians will pay attention
No,
to.
I think in principle you're correct. Absolutely correct, Peter. Okay, listen, before we go, we'll just say I'm sure you'll come back on again, Peter, and maybe we could discuss, next year's elections and the constituency vote and the list vote. That might be fun. But we'll leave that for next time on this lovely sunny day. We won't spoil it for half the population. Right, thanks very much, Peter. I'll catch you next time. All the best.
Bye, Eddie.
No worries. Take care.